Episode 3 of the Westies opens in the worst possible place for Jimmy's crew. John Gotti has Mickey. He's been beaten with a bottle smashed over his head and a baseball bat driven into his body, and despite everything Gotti's throwing at him, Mickey won't crack. He laughs off the torture instead. Gotti clearly understands this isn't going to be a quick job. Breaking a man who won't flinch takes patience most people in his position don't have, but he's not backing off. That's the opening image the episode wants sitting in your head for the rest of the hour. A kid absorbing real damage and refusing to give up a single word, while the people who care about him have no idea how long that can actually hold. The scene shifts to Jimmy and the rest of the crew, dealing with the fallout of that hostage situation from the outside. There's real frustration in the room, and most of it lands on Mickey, since it was his decision to give Aaron that bracelet that tipped Gotti off in the first place and set this entire crisis into motion. But the episode is careful not to let that blame sit uncomplicated. Jimmy himself killed Vincent Zaccaro earlier in the season, and that killing is what actually put the larger chain of events in motion to begin with. Mickey's mistake escalated an existing dangerous situation. It didn't create one out of nothing. The show wants you holding both of those facts at once, because nobody in this story gets to be simply the victim of someone else's error. Eamon finds out that Gotti is the one holding Mickey, and his read on the situation is immediate and grim. He believes it's only a matter of time before Mickey talks, whatever his resolve looks like right now. Jimmy, meanwhile, wants to move fast and get their guy back rather than wait and hope. Eamon takes the lead on strategy, and his plan runs directly through Big Paul Castellano. He goes to the head of the Gambino family and makes his case that they've got the wrong man entirely, using the ongoing construction deal at the Javits Center as leverage to make Castellano actually listen. If the plan works, it accomplishes two things simultaneously. It saves Mickey's life, and it keeps the truth about what actually happened buried, since getting Castellano involved effectively shuts down any deeper investigation from above before it can start. Running underneath all of this is a second, entirely separate problem the episode keeps circling back to: the discovery of a dead cop's body off the highway. That's the kind of thing that doesn't quietly disappear no matter how carefully Eamon tries to manage the fallout around Mickey. NYPD officer Birdie Polk gets word of it fast, and her instincts tell her immediately that this isn't a random killing, it's a setup. A suspicion that only gets stronger once a driver's license turns up at the scene of the crime. That detail is a slow burn thread the episode is planting early and won't pay off until much later, once Glenn's storyline catches up to it. For now, though, Eamon's meeting with Castellano goes his way, but nothing in this world comes free. Castellano agrees to release Mickey, but only in exchange for a favor. One of his own captains has been defying him, running narcotics through a disco in Jackson Heights called the Starship, which operates as a front for a Colombian distribution network. Castellano wants that situation handled, and specifically wants Eamon's crew to be the ones handling it, since bringing in outside muscle lets him discipline his own organization without triggering an internal war among his own captains. That's a small but telling detail about how precarious Castellano's grip actually is at this point in the story. A boss with total control over his own people doesn't need to outsource enforcement, so Jimmy and the boys head to the Starship to case the job. Jimmy talks his way into the operation by meeting a dealer named Jose and claiming a working relationship with Vincent, the very man Jimmy actually killed to set this whole chain of events rolling. That lie gets him access to the basement, where the real Colombian operation is running, giving him a genuine look at the layout before anyone makes a move. Up on the dance floor, though, things go sideways fast. Pat gets into a fight with someone, and the resulting chaos gets the entire crew thrown out of the club before they fully finish scouting the place. Elsewhere in the episode, Gotti goes to see Castellano directly, and the meeting doesn't go the way he'd probably hoped. Castellano chews him out specifically for getting anywhere near the drug trade, telling him plainly to keep his operation above that world entirely. Gotti absorbs the lecture without much visible pushback in the moment, but the episode makes a point of signaling that he's a live wire underneath that surface calm, not someone who's going to stay easily managed for long. That tension doesn't pay off within this episode, but it's clearly being set up as a fuse for later. Back with Eamon, Glenn shows up next, visibly rattled by Polk's investigation into the dead cop. He's realizing, in real time, how exposed he actually is, understanding that if his connection to Eamon ever surfaces, he could be treated as an accessory to a murder he wasn't even aware had happened. And that's true. Eamon genuinely didn't know about the cop's death before this conversation, something that becomes clear the moment Glenn leaves and Eamon curses under his breath, visibly shaken by how much bigger and more dangerous his situation has just become without his knowledge. Glenn's fear pushes him somewhere genuinely dark. He goes to confront his own estranged son, hitting him multiple times in an effort to force out information about what actually happened to the cop. It works brutally. He learns that Pat is the one responsible. And in that moment, Glenn realizes something important. If he was able to get this information this easily, out of his own estranged son, Gotti's people could dig up the exact same answer just as fast if they start pressuring the right people. That realization pushes him to act preemptively. He strikes a deal directly with Eamon. He'll personally deal with Pat and take care of the loose end. In exchange for one condition, his actual son, Danny, gets left permanently out of gang business. No exceptions. Eamon agrees to the terms without much hesitation. Meanwhile, the practical challenge of the Starship job is still looming, and it's a genuinely dangerous one. The Colombians running that basement operation are heavily armed, and taking them out cleanly is not going to be a simple task. Jimmy's honest with Bridget about exactly how risky this is, telling her outright that it could easily turn into a suicide mission for whoever goes in. Bridget, who spent most of this episode independently trying to figure out what her associate Brandon is actually doing in New York, sees an opportunity to solve two separate problems with a single move. She decides to arm Jimmy's crew using weapons from Brandon's own stockpile, reasoning that the Colombians' firepower is currently vulnerable, tied up down on the docks, making this the ideal moment to strike. Armed with that borrowed firepower, Jimmy and his crew hit the Starship and clear out the Colombian operation with surprisingly little resistance. It's a clean, efficient job. But before they leave the scene, Jimmy quietly pockets a significant amount of the seized cocaine to sell independently on the side, layering a personal betrayal directly on top of the favor he's just completed on Castellano's behalf. Nobody forces him into that decision. It's the one purely opportunistic choice in an episode otherwise built entirely out of characters reacting to pressure from somewhere else. With Eamon's end of the bargain fulfilled, Mickey is finally released back to his crew, much to the visible frustration of Gotti, whose plan to break him never got the chance to pay off. And in the episode's closing scene, Glenn follows through on his own arrangement. He tracks down Pat and kills him outright, resolving the immediate threat hanging over his son, while simultaneously committing exactly the kind of act he spent this entire episode terrified of being blamed for in the first place. Structurally, this is a noticeably slower episode than the two that preceded it, and the Starship raid in particular plays as somewhat disconnected from the main Irish-Italian conflict driving the season, functioning more as action filler than as a storyline that meaningfully deepens the central rivalry between the two organizations. There was a version of this episode where the raid forced an actual alliance between Jimmy's crew and Bridget's IRA contacts, something the show gestures toward without fully committing to. What the episode does accomplish clearly, though, is setting the stage for the next phase of conflict. Pat's death, carried out quietly by a cop protecting his own son rather than by any deliberate act of war, is almost certainly going to be misread by Jimmy as direct aggression coming from Gotti's side. That misunderstanding, built entirely on nobody in this story having the full picture of what actually happened to who and why, is exactly what the rest of this season looks primed to escalate from, episode after episode, until somebody finally gets the story wrong badly enough that there's no walking it back.